Today, I will show you how you can make one of these awesome doctor-style handbags. They've got this neat folding mechanism, and all you need to build it is a few things from the hardware store. So, let's head over to the workshop and I'll show you how it's made. So first we will get started with the metal hinges, and for that I just have some aluminum bar from the hardware store. This one is 20 by 2 millimeters. And so I will take my template and just put it on one side. And then we will just mark the end and also the position where we will need to drill the holes. And because this one is too big to put on my bandsaw, then you'll just have to use some good old elbow grease. Then we will just repeat the same thing for the other one. Then mark the position, mark the holes. And start cutting. So now we have our two pieces, and in order to make sure that we don't hurt our leather later on, I will just be cutting off some of the edges over on the bandsaw. But now that we have some fresh cuts, they are also very sharp, and again, this will just hurt our leather if we just put it in like this. So I'll just take a file and also make sure that everything is smooth and we have no sharp corners that will hurt our leather later on. Okay, now the only part missing is we need some holes in there so we can put it together later. In my case, the book screws that I use are around 4 millimeters thick. So I have a 5 millimeter screw, drill, that's the one. So we'll just take this and that's a wood drill. That's no good. Much better. Lastly, I'll be using a countersink drill just to make sure again that there's no fraying and no rough edges, but this one is really optional. You can also just go over it with a little bit of sandpaper and you're gonna be fine. Okay, now that we prepared the hinges, we can get back to some actual leather work. And we will first start with the handle, which will just consist of these two pieces. But again, in this pattern, I want to show you a few steps that are totally optional, but will still elevate your craft to another level. And over here, I have a finished version of the bag. And you can see that this handle has some nice padding, which makes it really stand out and also more comfortable to carry. And you really don't need to do this padding, but I still want to show you how to do it in this video, so that you have some things to work on or maybe things you can improve. And so if you want to do the padding, you will need an additional piece of leather. I'm just using a little bit of my scrap leather because you will not be seeing this later on. And then you just take the short piece from our handles. And for this pattern, this is 25 millimeters broad. So I will be taking this leftover scrap piece and cutting it down to around 20 millimeters. So that will give us a little bit of leftover on both sides. And I'll also be checking, so this is 13 centimeters wide. And here, give us a little bit more space, so probably 1 centimeter on each side. So we'll cut this down to 11 centimeters. So I'll just mark this, cut it down. Now we will be gluing this to the short piece of the handle. We'll just be taking some good old contact cement, put this on the flash side of the handle piece, and repeat the same for the piece of padding. Then we'll just leave this to dry for a few minutes. Okay, now that both pieces are dry, we'll just take our padding and put it right in the middle, so that the distances on each side and also here are all the same. And we'll just press it down. Now, before we can attach the top piece, because now this is the grain side of the leather, and at least my contact cement really doesn't stick well to the grain side, I'll just take my skiving knife and I'll just start scratching this side. Now, the last, let's say, improvement that we can also make is I will take my skiving knife and the edges on the right and left side, I will just cut these down. So that we have a nice transition. Repeat the same for the other side. Now we also want to mark until where we will need to glue it, because otherwise it will get in the way. So center this here, middle. That's good enough. Mark it on both sides. Okay, now when both pieces are dry, I'll just take the bottom part and look at it from top and put it right in the center. Press it down. Then to get a nice seal on the side seams, I will just be using my bone folder. Start working my way around this. And then we have some nice padding on our handle. So next up, we can start sewing this. Now, if you did not add any padding, now you want to mark the stitch line on the outside. But because the padding already gives me a clear line where we can put our punch line, I won't need to do this. The only one that I will have to mark is once on both ends of the handle. And then we will also need to check where does it end here on the back side. So I'll just check both on the back and the front, make like a very small indication mark. So we know where to put the marks. And this is something where you can definitely just take the marks from the pattern itself. I mean, that's why they're there, right? But I also want to show you how you can do these things on your own, so that you might not always have to rely on these things. And also, if sometimes maybe some of the cuts are a little bit different, it's always good to have these kind of techniques so you can actually verify that every step you're doing is what you wanted to do. So, hammer time. Okay, but now before we start sewing this together, I'll just quickly bevel and burnish the sides that are hanging off, because we will not be able to reach them later on. Now we can start sewing this together. And before we start stitching, we want to put in our rectangle ring and then fold over the edge so that we can stitch through it and secure the rectangle ring to the handle. We'll just start here. And for these, I also like to wrap around the thread on this outside so it holds also more securely. And it also has a nice decorative effect, so people really know that what you did was actually hand stitched. And from there, we can just start stitching all around the handle, and also we'll need to put in the rectangle ring on the other side as well. Now we've got our handle assembled, and now these edges might still be a little bit underlined, so now you can also just use some sandpaper if you want. But personally for this one I like to use my knife, but if you try this one, be really careful, because if you slip this one up, you might have just ruined your handle that you put all the work in one go. So at your own risk. But it works quite well for me, because the pieces of the handle, due to gluing them down on the sides, they will have a bit of an angle. So the knife can be quite nice to just take off these edges, so we get a flat surface for burnishing. But once that is looking good, we can basically start beveling and burnishing. But on my piece, I can also see that I have some glue leftovers, and they will stick out after burnishing. So I get myself one of these rubbers. You can find them on Amazon, like 5 packs. And with those, you can just go over your edge, and it will remove all the leftovers of your contact cement. They're quite handy. Now we just take our beveler, go all over the edge. And now you can probably also see why I beveled and burnished those sides before, because we will need to add the rectangle rings, and you will just not get good access to those edges at this point. So it is better to do that beforehand. Now, beveling. And then, just as always, we take some Tokonol, dip all over our edge. Now, with our handle being done, we need something to attach the handle to. So, we will continue with our hinges. Now, to start with the hinge covers, first need to be careful. We will have a long hinge and a short hinge. So this piece should be around 2 centimeters smaller. And the reason for that is, if we look at the assembled bag for a minute, in order for them to fold up properly, this one needs to sit on the outside. So the next thing we can also see is that we will need to make sure that we attach the handle on the long one. Because if we attach it to the short one, this bag won't be closing anytime soon. So for that reason, we'll put the short cover aside for now, and then start working on the long hinge cover. And first, on the pattern, you will see these 4 dots or holes. So we can just get a hole punch and punch those. But again here, this will also depend a little bit on the hardware you're using. Because on this one, I have these small ring connectors where you can then later attach a shoulder strap to. And in my case, they're secured with 2 screws. So I will need to punch holes accordingly so that I can fix these screws in later. If you just want to use a rivet, for example, then you can just punch the holes indicated. Otherwise, you might need to modify this a little bit depending on the hardware you're using. But for me, I can certainly punch the inner hole already, because this will also be secured with the rivet. Professionals at work now. And then we'll also need to prepare our connector piece so that we can actually attach our handle to the hinge cover. Then first we will want to prepare the connector straps. So, as always, first good step is to bevel our edges. Okay. Now that we have both pieces ready, I will be punching one side with a normal small hole. And for the other side, as I mentioned, I have these small chain connectors that have 2 screws on the back side. So I will just be pressing them down. And that will leave me with the indentations that I need to punch them. Then I will repeat the same steps on the long hinge cover. I will press Then for the assembly, we'll first want to start with the inside. So just put a rivet in there, attach it to our handle cover, hinge cover. Repeat the same on the other side. Come on. There you go. And then first we will secure those rivets in place. Now we can easily take our handle, put it a little bit into shape, put it through one side, pull it over the other side, and now we just need to fix our chain connectors. Now we have that part assembled. We have our nice handle with a nice padding and also our chain connectors, where later we can attach an adjustable shoulder strap if we want to. Now then, we can actually start with our hinges. For this, our hinge covers will need to go around the aluminum hinges. So what I usually do first is already fold the hinge cover. We can take our good old contact cement again and start gluing all the sides up. And then we can insert the aluminum hinges and sew everything shut. Okay, now that the pieces are dry, we can take our long hinge, put it in the long hinge cover, and then we'll just want to start on the corner and start gluing this together. And you might have noticed my hinge covers are still quite sharp at these edges, and that is because when I cut these pieces, I just cut them straight, because I prefer to just cut the corners now, because then they align more easily. And for that, I don't have a fancy corner radius something, so I just use some standard washer in the correct size. And it does the trick. Just cut along, and then repeat it for the other side as well, for both covers. And then we can just start marking our stitch line all the way around. But for this one, I will be doing that over at the sewing machine. Okay, now that we got both our hinges done, we can continue preparing the back and the front piece. For that we will need 3 pieces. And I will be starting off with the back lock. So as always, we'll start off by beveling and burnishing. In order to prepare the buckle and the back lock, I'll just fold this piece in half. And then we punch a long hole. Just cut out the middle. So that we can take our buckle, put it on there, through. So we will want to put the back lock on this way, because this will be pulling. Oh. Yeah, no, other way around. Now we got it. Put on the back lock here. And then for my back lock, I can just secure it on the back side with 2 screws. Then for the other part of the back lock, we want to use this rectangular piece. And here I'll just open this one up and then mark where I will need to cut. Openings for the back lock. Then we just put it through the back lock and secure it on the back side. Now, the only part missing is the flap. Then we punch these holes. Buckle. And we have our back lock assembled already as well. Now we'll just need to attach these pieces to our back and front respectively. Let me just put on some glue, spread it around nice and even. It's probably a better way than doing it with your fingers, but hey, it ain't stupid if it works. Just center it nicely. And pull it down. And we just leave this to dry. And we will do the same thing for the back side as well, with the other piece. Once both our front and our back piece are dry, we can take our wing divider and mark our stitch line. And repeat the same for this piece. Then we can start punching holes again. Now the holes are punched and we can go on stitching them. Next up, we want to prepare the gusset of our bag, which consists of 2 side pieces and a bottom piece. And to get started, you might have already guessed it, we will just start beveling and burnishing the top part of the sides. Now with that prepared, we can come to the interesting part. And for that, we will need to glue the sides to the bottom first. And to do that, we will first need to scrap our leather on the bottom and the side pieces. And for that, scratch the part up to the corner of these triangles. If you go beyond that, you will see it later on the bottom of your bag. Now we apply contact cement to all these surfaces that we just scratched. Then we want to glue the side pieces to the bottom with their grain sides facing each other. Align them on the outside edge, all the way across. And repeat for the other side. Now for the next part, you can also make your life a little bit easier if you have a groove cutter. But this is very much optional, it just makes the next step a little bit easier. I will just take my groove cutter, cut it on the corner of the triangles to the other side. Now we once again take our contact cement, and again still on the bottom side. Apply contact cement here and the other side as well. Now we take our side pieces and start folding it outward. Create another seam. And these seams you can also hammer them down to really make sure they're sticking well. Now our gusset should look like this. And from here we can mark our stitch line. Then we just punch and stitch through here all the way through the bottom. Now we also have the back and front pieces assembled, so we just need to hammer down the threads. Then we can continue to burnish the top side of the front and back piece. And now we can already get started to attach our hinges to our front and back piece. And to do that, I will be taking both our short and long hinge cover, wing divider, and set it to 8 millimeters. Mark this on the top side of both hinges here. The part that we mark now will be our indicator on where we will need to glue the front and back piece to the hinge covers. And as previously, because we are gluing on the grain side, we will need to rough up that surface before applying our glue. Now we can apply contact cement to all these edges so we can start gluing them together. And now, while this is drying, one important note before you glue these pieces together. So let me get my reference bag again here. So we discussed earlier, the handle definitely needs to go on the long hinge, because otherwise this will get in the way. Similarly, we also need to make sure that we have the correct position for the front and the back piece. And as we can see here, we open it up. The part with the handle, we know, is a long hinge, and our buckle goes through this. So the piece with the buckle needs to go on the long hinge cover, whereas the front with the buckle will need to use the short hinge. Let's double check if we made this here correctly. We have a long hinge cover with the flap, and the front with the other buckle part on the short one. All good. Just important to know. So just glue them up on the line that you indicated earlier. And from here on out, we can once again mark our stitch line. And for this bag design, I have 2 lines of stitching for this piece, but especially if you're hand stitching it or you might be short on time or anything else, you can also just do 1, and it's fine. Now that we attached our hinges to our front and back piece, we can start with the assembly. And we will need to glue the front and the back to the gusset. So we'll first apply some glue all around the front and back piece. Then we will also do the same for the gusset. And note, on the gusset we will have these little triangles, which will later make more sense, because when these sides are folded over, we can see that when we angle these, they will form a perfect corner for our front and back piece. That also means, even though they are overlaying right now, you will need to make sure that you have glue on both the upper and lower triangle piece. To assemble the gusset and the front and back piece, we can fold over the gusset, and then you should see that the triangles before now should line up perfectly in one corner. And before gluing them together, I also like to fold over the edges here on the gusset. Then we take either our front or back piece and start at the bottom. So we want to make sure that the tip of the triangle goes into the corner of our front or back piece. And from there we can just work our way all across the bottom. And then the other tip of the triangle should go right into the other corner. Then for the sides, we again take the tip of the triangle, align it all the way in the corner, press it down, and work our way upwards. Just repeat the same for the other side. And then just repeat the same for the other piece. And I'll just lay over a piece of fabric over the sides so that they don't glue the sides already by accident. It's already actually starting to look like a bag. But of course, gluing certainly is enough for the sides, so we'll also need to stitch that. And the easiest way I find is now to just lay your bag flat on the table, and then from here mark our stitch line all the way around. And when punching your holes, you want to make sure there is one punch that is right in the corner between the two pieces from the gusset. And then just work your way all around, stitch it together, and then we'll continue from there how to assemble the hinges. Now that we have attached the gusset to the front and back piece, we can put the bag flat on the table, and I will be using my bone folder to put out the edges from the glue. And so we also get some nice and defined lines on our bag. I'll use my hammer again to tap down the edges, the stitches. And then we can start burnishing and beveling all around the edges on both the front and the back piece. And additionally, we can also still bevel and burnish the part of the hinge covers that are not covered now by the front and back piece. Now, the only piece missing is we actually need to assemble the hinge. And as you can see on the hinge covers, there are still some holes missing where we can later put in the book screws to secure the hinge on both sides. And what I like to do for this is just start rubbing the hinge covers on where the holes should be. And if you do that after a little while, you will see an indent from where the holes underneath in the aluminum bar are. And I'll just repeat that for all four until I know exactly where I will need to make my holes. And then I will use my drill and use the exact same drill bit as I used initially to drill the aluminum bars. Just mark on the indicated position. And then, again, just repeat that for the other three. Okay, and now that we have all the holes drilled for our book screws, the only part missing is to bend the hinges in position. And for that, the way I like to do it, or so far I find the easiest, is to stand up and look at your bag from above so that you can see the line where the main body is ending. And I start on the short side of the hinge. So the short hinge, check the position, and then just carefully start bending it 90 degrees. And then repeat the same thing. On the other side. just start bending it on that corner, push it around, and then just one more. Now that it's in shape, we can attach the book screws and then we can do some more fine tuning. Put the hinges in position. We can take our book screws, put them through the holes, and secure them on the other side. And do the same for the other side as well. And of course, we need to make sure they're the right way, because the shoulder hinge has to go inside, otherwise this doesn't work. And now it should already look something like this. Now we can also push in the edges a little bit further and check our first fit. And here, for example, we can see that this corner goes over, but still doesn't go over as nicely. We can start bending that a little bit more. And what also helps for me is that for the shorter one, we can bend it a little bit inward. Check again. Yeah, and this is already going much smoother. And we also get this kind of lock-in effect. So it holds quite nicely. Then, once you can keep going with this a little bit further until you have a fit that works for you. And then we can also take our buckle, put it on the other side, and then also adjust the length as needed. Yeah, I think this one is good the way that it is. And there you have it. A neat little handbag. Optionally, now if you want, you can also make some additional shoulder straps that you can attach to these chain connectors. But otherwise, you now have a very nice handbag, which makes for a great gift or just something to treat yourself